Okay, looks like we're ready to go, everybody. So welcome, and thank you, everybody, for inviting me here tonight. Since I couldn't completely hear the introduction, I might be repeating a little bit of information here. But my name is Jill Klees, and I am the SLIS Career Consultant, and thanks for inviting me tonight. I'm going to be presenting information about putting together a basic resume. So what I'm going to do is we're going to go step by step on how to put together just a well-developed resume. And I know that Amelia put a link up a little bit ago, and that's just a sample of the resume that I'm going to be working through today. So I've broken it down into sections, and that's what the PowerPoints will be on. But if you'd like to print that out or look at a full visual copy of one, that's what the link is about. This session tonight will be really informal, so please do ask me your resume questions. I am having some issues with my sound, so please do type your questions into the chat box, and I will try to keep an eye on them and answer your questions as much as I can as we're going through. This session is being recorded, so if you need to drop off at all, then you'll be able to pick the recording up at another time. So here we go. So I have a question for all of you before we start, and you can do this by how about just doing smiley face on there so I'll see. But how many of you right now have a resume? Go ahead and give me a smiley face or a raise of hand and let me know how many people actually have a resume. So I see 1, 2, 3, 4. I got a thumbs up. Not too many people. 6, 7, 8. All right, so not everybody has a resume. Okay, so of those of you who raised your hand and you have a resume, how many of you love it? Like you mean you look at it and you're like, dang, this is impressive. All right, I see 1. I love asking this question because I don't get too many positives. All right, I got about 1 person who is in love with their resume. So here's what I want to say to you. If you don't love it, then chances are good that an employer is not going to love it either. And that's why resume workshops are so important, so that I can give you lots of tips on how to put together a well-developed resume. So this, oops, come on slides. Hold on. Why isn't my slide moving forward? Maybe we'll just do it this way. There we go. Okay, that works. So this is just a screenshot of the handout of the basic resume that I'm going to work through. And really, again, this is a very basic format. This is not a one-size-fits-all by any means. So don't feel like if yours doesn't look just like this that there's something wrong. It all depends on what kind of experience and background that you have to bring to the table when we put a resume together. And some of you are career changers, and you're going to have a lot of different experience to pull from, but this just gives us a working document so that we have something to talk about as we go through this example. But what I like about this particular example is that it has a nice logical flow of information. And I'm going to be breaking all this down, but it starts at the top. It's got your contact information. We go to objective statement. We go to education. We talk about coursework. We have a skills section right there at the top. We get into projects. We get into experience. So it's got a very nice logical flow. It's easy to read. The space, the white space on the page has been used very effectively. The font size that you want to use for your resume is between 10 and 12 points font. Your margins usually can go as small as a ½ inch. In fact, this example has a ½ inch. So you start to see how much white space you really can use on a page. You want to use a nice clean font, something like Arial, Verdana, Calibri. Did I say that right, I think? Calibri, Times New Roman, something like that is very basic. So let's start breaking this down now, section by section, and as you have questions with each section, certainly type them in the chat box for me. And let me see if I can get this working now. There we go. Okay, so again, starting right at the top. Contact information and an objective statement. So because the PowerPoint is short, not all of the contact information went straight across the page like in the example. And again, that's just one way to format it. See how everything goes straight across the page here? That's one way, and that's if you're trying to save space. So it's just an option. But again, name at the top, all of your contact info. Make sure that you have a professional sounding email address that's up there. A lot of times people aren't putting their full addresses on their resumes any longer. That's if you're going to post it on an external job board. So if that's you and you just want to put your phone number and an email address, that's perfectly fine as well. An objective statement. There's a lot of kind of dialogue back and forth about, yes, exactly, Ellie, mixed messages about, you know, to use an objective statement or to not use an objective statement. And I mean, I still think it goes back and forth. So the benefit to having one is that it does let an employer know very quickly what is the position that you're interested in. There are some employers who still like an objective statement. There are other employers who say, you know, if you're applying for a specific job that I have open, that I know the job that what you're applying for and it's not needed. If you're including a cover letter along with your resume, then you would not need an objective statement on your resume, because on the cover letter, that's where you're telling the employer what the position is that you're applying for. So I kind of leave it up to each of you individually to determine if you want to have the objective statement on there or if you think you need to have it on there. So at this point in time, it is something that's optional. I think if your resume is not really focused and it might be difficult for an employer to know the type of position you're applying for, then it could be important. If your resume is very targeted, which we want it to get to that point, then you may not need it. So I hope that that makes sense. So there's no exact yes or no, right or wrong answer to that. Are there any other questions about contact information, how you might put it up at the top, objective statements before I move into the next section? And again, I'm just starting at the top of that handout of a resume and I'm working down. All right, so moving on. So the next section, I have education up at the top. So the reason I have it right up there at the top is because if you're a current student, that's where it should be. You want an employer to know exactly where you are in your educational program, when you're planning to graduate, and that gives them a sense then of if you're applying for an internship, if you're applying for a volunteer position or an entry-level type of position. They get a sense of where you're at educationally. So again, I kind of ran out of room on this PowerPoint, but I like the Master of Library and Information Science, the GPA, and the date you expect to graduate all on one line. It saves a lot of space. There's no need to put the date of when you started the program. Just put the date of when you expect to graduate. That's what an employer really wants to know. GPAs are optional. It doesn't have to be on there. If it's something you're proud of, if you're working, you've got a high GPA and you want it on there, go for it. I have a question that I'm going to take right here. Let's see. This says, once had a person put a very unprofessional personal email address on their resume. I don't think that was very wise. It got a lot of chuckles, but the person didn't get the job. Thank you for sharing that observation, because that's absolutely true. So that's something that you want to be sure of. And if you look at your email address and you're not sure if it's professional or if it would work or what people's impression would be, go ahead and ask somebody or ask me what my first impression is. Or you can certainly have a separate email address that you would be using just for your job search, and then you have your other one that's your fun one that you like to use. Okay, so back to education. GPAs being optional. Having the relevant coursework, again, that's another optional section. But if you are relatively new to the LIS field and you don't have a lot of experience and you're going to be relying a lot on your education and the courses and the projects that you've taken in the program, then it's nice to have that section on there. Again, you would not list every single course that you've taken, but you tailor it towards the objective statement. So you list the coursework that would be most relevant or most important for an employer to know that you've taken. If you have a bachelor's degree, which most everybody's going to have a degree, of course, then you can certainly list it on here as well. If when you graduated is dated, meaning maybe it's over 5 years ago that you got your bachelor's degree, and you have a feeling that, well, maybe it starts to date you in some way, then you can leave the date off. As you can see on this example, I left the date off, and that's certainly okay. For a professional email address, you can actually set up a separate email account with a professional email address, which typically is your name or your first letter of your first name and has your last name. That would be a professional email address. So if you just need to set up a new account, that you use just for your job search. That's how you would have a professional email account. And that was a question that came in the chat box. There's another question. Can you put relevant coursework in your cover letter? You can. I wouldn't list it the way it looks here for the resume, but if there is a particular course, one or two that you've taken or that you're taking right now that are directly related to a position that you're applying for, and you want to make sure that the reader knows right away a course that you're taking or what you're doing in that course and how it relates to the job that you're applying for, you can certainly mention it in the cover letter and refer to it that way. Are there any other questions about, here's another one. So Philip's saying, mention it as a project or related skills. I'm not sure, Philip, if that's a question or if you're just, it's a statement back to Ellie. So I'm not sure. If it is a question, let me know if in reference to coursework. So if you're just going to list the title of a class, then you can list it how it is here in this example for coursework. What's a very effective thing to do also is to take a course that you've taken and list out maybe a project that you've done or an outcome from the coursework or a project that you did in that class and what you learned from it. And I'll show you a project section here in just a moment on how I would approach that on a resume. There's another question from Lizette about leaving the bachelor's date of graduation off. Is it something that's likely to be asked during interviews, for example? That's a good question. I've never heard it asked in an interview of when you graduated with your bachelor's degree. It doesn't necessarily, it's not really relevant, most likely, to the job that you're going to be applying for, particularly if you're going to be looking for a job that's in the LIS field, which I assume that you would be after going to the master's program. So what's going to be most important to people is the master's degree and how current that is or how your experience relates to the job you're applying for. So these are all good questions. Feel free to keep them coming, and I'll just keep moving along here. Oh, here's another one. I don't think people can ask anything that might hint at your actual age. I mean, it's okay. They can't ask things that get at your age. If they really wanted to know when you graduated, they could, or if you fill out an application for a job, and a lot of, let's say, academic positions would have an application as well. If you're going even a public library, there's applications, and that's where you have to be very detailed and list out dates. So at some point it's going to be on there, but it doesn't necessarily have to be on the resume. Yeah, the reason that I mentioned listing coursework on here is because it is something that people will put on their resume if you don't have a lot of experience that relates to the job that you're applying for. So again, what I'm covering tonight is a pretty basic resume, so a lot of these areas that I'm talking about are optional, and it depends on if it fits for you or not. So everybody's going to have a different story and be coming to the table with a different level of experience. But if you're relatively new to the LIS field, don't have a lot of experience, then you will be relying heavily on coursework and projects from the degree program to demonstrate your experience to employers. Yes, so Phil says, if you have related experience, would you leave off the coursework? Probably I would, unless for some reason I have taken a specific course or two that really directly relates to the job I'm applying for. I might list those two on there and the rest of them perhaps not. So again, it's kind of, this is all sort of a gray area that we're talking about, and you need to kind of pull what you think works for you, or you put together a draft of your resume, and then at some point you're probably going to be sending it to me to revise, or not revise, I should say critique, and then I can give you some feedback onto whether it works or not. So hopefully that makes sense. Okay, moving on, but keep them coming. Good questions. All right, so the skills section. Again, it's optional, but in the LIS field, no matter what kind of position you're applying for, whether it's a traditional academic library, public library, or you're going into a non-traditional field where you're relying more on your technical skills, having a skills section or a computer skills or a technical skills section up towards the top of the resume, and usually it can fit right after education, is a great thing to have. The reasoning behind this is, again, if an employer is screening your resume, And let me ask this question. How long do you think employers screen when they're initially scanning through resumes? How much time do you think they give you when they're initially scanning? So I got a 15 seconds. What else do we have? We have 5 seconds. We have 1 minute, 30 to 45, 5 seconds, 20 seconds. All right, these are 2 minutes. Ooh, 2 minutes would be nice. I got a 10 seconds, a 3 seconds. The answer is about 7 to 10 seconds. So think of it this way. We read from top to bottom, from left to right. So when I say putting together a resume that has a logical flow of information, you want to put it in such a way, your information in such a way, so that a person who's screening your resume, left to right, top to bottom, giving you 7 to 10 seconds, is going to find the specific information that they're looking for to determine very quickly, does your resume make it into the yes, good pile or the I'm not interested right now pile? And that's what you want to think about. So there it goes for having a skill section up towards the top. If a position you're applying for, which most of them do, are listing certain skills that they want you to have, that could be a nice section to have right up there. And thank you, there's feedback. Who's that from? Rosa? Thank you, Rosa. That's good feedback. Okay, so skill section. Right there in the center where I wrote optional, you can qualify your level of experience. So sometimes you will see something that says, you can write proficient in a Word, Excel, Blackboard, Collaborate, whatever it is, or I have knowledge of these particular areas, or I'm familiar with these particular areas. So you can certainly qualify your skills, or you can just string them together separated by a comma. So you have, again, some options there. Another trick is to think about what are the main skills in technology, computer skills, that are listed on the job description, and list those in preference on your resume. So say on this particular example, Destiny is one of the skills that's listed on the job description. I might move that into the first place where Camtasia is versus having it towards the end. So there's little tricks and things that you could do like that to try to make sure that somebody sees these keywords and key skills that you have to offer right away. Okay, moving on. Oh, here's another question. Let me check this out. This one's from Jerry. So much electronic application where the resume is a PDF. How common is it for HR just run a keyword search to weed out weak resumes? Okay, here's the story. When you're applying for specific jobs that are posted, the HR person is initially going to look at every single resume of the person that applied and determine if that resume makes it into the yes, good, I want to talk to you, not so good at this point. When they actually will do a keyword search through their computer database, can happen, say, later on if I am not finding the candidates that I'm looking for. Say I'm the hiring manager. I'm not finding the right candidates that I'm looking for people applying for my job, so my job description. So I might go to HR and say, can you just do a scan in our database of somebody who's got this skill, this skill, this skill, and this skill? And they might see who pops up that way. So at some point, yes, computers can be kind of reading, and I did little finger quotes around that, reading your resume and extracting and looking for keywords. But just know that human eyes are also going to be looking at that resume and visually screening it as well. And a couple more questions came in here. Let me check this out. On the job description. Thank you, Philip. Yes, so it's that ranking process. It's almost like a rubric, right, where you can have, here's the key skills I'm looking for across the top, and here's all the people who applied down towards the bottom, and you're literally kind of checking off those that make it in. And thanks, Amelia, for putting that sample back up. Okay, looks like we're caught up. All right, so the skills, and now I'm moving on to projects. So if you don't have a lot of current experience that relates to a job you're applying for, or not a lot of relevant experience because you're new to the field and you're still in your program, but you've done some projects through your coursework then projects might logically be the very next section on your resume. And projects is one of those areas that a lot of students, and it doesn't matter what level you're at, master's, undergrad, right, where you're all at master's now, students forget to include projects as relevant experience on their resume. And it's really a very, very valuable tool that you can use to your benefit, because when you're in a program, that might be some of your most current experience, or it might be some of the experience that directly relates to the type of job that you're applying for. So you can have a project section, and again, this is an optional section, but I do recommend it. So you have your projects heading, you give the project a title, and if there's no right or wrong to it, you're just giving it a title. You can list as many projects as you want on your resume, or as many projects are as relevant. So give the project a title. You could just put SJSU so they know where you did it. Just put the year that you did it. And then give it some accomplishment statements, some bullet-pointed accomplishment statements, and be as detailed and specific as you can. So really, here's what I go with. I'll tell people, think about what you did. And the what you did is, what is the action that I took? Think about the skills that you use. So what are all those skill words that I can infuse into my accomplishment statements in this project section? And then what was the result? Or what was the outcome? Or what did I learn from this example? Because that's what employers want to see. So you start your statements with action words, and you give as much detailed information as you can about the action, the skills, and the result. And if you're not sure what all the skill words are that you want to include, that's where you start looking at job descriptions of jobs that you're interested in, and you get a sense of what are those types of words and skills that employers are looking for, and that's what I want to try to infuse into my accomplishment statements. So this is just right here is 2 examples of how you could go about writing and including your projects on a resume. Both of these examples just happen to have 2 bullet point statements. There's no magic number, so it could be certainly more than 2. It's whatever you need to get the point across. There's a question here from Ada. I thought of mentioning those projects, but I'm not sure if we can mention library names or if I should use pseudonyms for the libraries. It's probably fine to use a library name, but really the library name is not what's important on the project. What's important is what you did on the project. So listing the library name it's not even necessary. Really go back to thinking about what did you do? What's the action that you took? And again, what are those skills? What's that outcome? Yes, just give it a title. It could be, public library project. Again, the title doesn't necessarily matter either. It's really what you did on it, and that's what you want to come across. And employers look at it. It's a great way to demonstrate your experience. Are there other questions about projects? How you would include them, how you would write about them? Okay, so I'm going to move, oh, we got another one, here we go, hold on. So the how many, again, it doesn't necessarily, it's up to you how many projects how about think of it this way. If you're not sure if you should add a project on your resume or not, think about, will it add value? If I put this on there, will it add value in demonstrating a particular skill set or qualification or a certain level of experience that I have? That's what you should go with. There's another question, should everything be bulleted on the resume? Not necessarily, but you can see by using bullet points, it makes it very easy for a person to read it. So I go back to my point about your initial scanning of a resume. The employer or the HR person gives you 7 to 10 seconds. They're going to read from the top to the bottom, from the left to the right, and you want them to very easily, very quickly be able to pull out key information. So bullet points help the eye see things easier. Your eye kind of goes to where the bullet points are and even where some of the bolding is on the resume. So you think about it in those terms of when you scan through what makes it easier for people to see things. But you don't have to use bullet points. Again, it's going to be up to you. In the very end, when you put together your resume and if I give you feedback on it and other people give you feedback on it, in the very end, you have to be really satisfied. That's why I said, how many people love their resume? You want to love it. You want to look at your resume and feel like, dang, this is good. I'm impressed with myself. And that's when you know you've done it. That's when you know you're set. So your resume in the end is a representation of yourself, and you want to be really happy with what you have. Philip's got a question. Projects are different from internships. Yes. So for me, the project section really relates to the projects that relate to your coursework that you're getting in the MLIS program. Your internship experience would be listed under experience, and I will get to some examples of that. But that's where I would list internship, under experience. And again, you're going to write accomplishment statements about what you've done in the internship experience. 3 or 4 would be fine. Okay. All right, so we're looking good. Okay, so I'm going to move on, and again, if you think of another question about projects, go ahead and ask. Oh, here we go. I did a project labeling novel fiction with different color codes and letters of authors. Should I include it in the resume? I would include it in the resume if demonstrating that experience adds value, demonstrates a skill to a position that you're applying for. So when you hear me talk about writing a tailored and targeted resume, you're targeting it and you're tailoring it towards jobs that you're applying for. So if, for example, this project about labeling fiction in different color codes is something that you might do on a job that you're applying for, or that has something to do with a skill or qualification that an employer is looking for, that's where it would add value. Or here's another way that I'll present this to people. I'll say, let's look at that particular project where you're labeling fiction. I'll say, what about that experience do you want to bring with you into this new position that you're applying for? And when you think of it in terms like that, that helps you break it down, perhaps even to different skills. So maybe I'm just going to make stuff up, but maybe in that particular project, maybe you had to do a needs assessment and identify what would make it easier for patrons to find information. And it was determined that color coding them by author, was going to make the most sense. So you took initiative to come up with this idea, and you went ahead and implemented it, and the result was that client feedback in this library showed that people could find the materials that they were looking for easier and faster, and it made their library experience more appealing. But still something like that. So you really kind of think about what are all the pieces that are involved in a project, and how can you demonstrate all of your experience and skills, and that's what you would write. Okay, I hope that made sense. You're welcome. Okay, so experience. This section on this particular example happens to be called related experience because the examples that I have in here all relate to working in the library. But that doesn't always fit so neatly with everybody. So you might have a section on your resume that says related experience, and that might be where you put an internship that relates to the LIS field. You might put in some volunteer work that you've done in a library that is in related experience. And that might be all that we have under related experience. And then you might have another heading that just says additional experience or additional work experience. And that's where you might list some of the other types of jobs that you've had that don't seemingly relate to the LIS field, but you would focus on skills that you developed or used in those other jobs that can transfer over into what you want to go into. So let me focus on this particular example, and I have a question from Ellie. Would you state that it's an internship? Yeah, usually my title might say library intern. And that's how I would kind of put it in there. But if my title didn't have intern in it, I might not just add it in there, internship. I still am just going to put, here was my title, here's where I did it, and here's the accomplishments that I had. So I hope that makes sense. Okay. So for work experience, or here's our related experience, I like to have your title be the first thing that an employer would see. And usually I'll put that in bold. And again, that's because if they're scanning really quickly, their eye is going to go to where the bold is, and that's a nice way to break up all of the text on the page. So if you have your title, you're going to do, here's where you work, so it's basically the company name. Now, city and state and the dates are actually, if you look at the example, are all on one line. I try not to break it up in 2 lines because really that's a waste of a line. That's a waste of space. I'd rather use that line for an accomplishment statement. So I try to get the title, where I worked, city, state, and dates all on one line. You can use the month and you can use the year, or you can just go with years. Either way is really fine. And then you're going to start in with your accomplishment statements. So again, there's no magic number to the number of accomplishment statements that you're going to have. I was looking at on the example, I noticed the first 2 both have 3, but that just randomly worked out that way. That was not purposeful. But you talk about what you did, starting with the action words. Now, if it's a job that is present, you're going to use present tense. Oops, so Racklin said coordinated right there. That should say coordinate, although I guess that was past tense. But for current jobs, you're going to use present verb tense. For past jobs, it'll be past. Let's see what the next one is. So here's another one. This is library clerk. So it gets developed and produced, researched. Here's the result, secured $8,000. Created the print materials. You can put periods or no periods at the end of your statements. Just pick one way and be consistent, whatever you choose to do. And I think I have one more. And this one was a student assistant. Now, here's an example. Yeah, so this first example right here, if this didn't happen to be in a library, and this just happened to be another type of job that this person had, you can talk a lot about transferable skills. So those would be things like customer service, working with diverse population, working in a fast-paced environment. You might develop those skills from other types of experiences, and that would be your transferable skills. That might be the accomplishment statement that you're going to put on your resume. So does that make sense for everybody? Looks like a couple people are typing in some questions. I'm gonna see what we have coming through, because that was a lot of information with experience. I'm gonna back it up too. So let me know what questions you have. Okay, here they start coming. So that's a good question. So what do you do when your positions were all about doing a variety of things? So that is perfect. And I will get to the other questions too. I'm going to focus on this one right here. So here's what you do. You are going to think about, okay, what are all the things that I've done in this job, being a Jill of all trades? But not all of those things are going to relate in some way to the type of job that you want to go into, or are going to be a good demonstration of skills that will transfer over into an LIS type of job that you want to go into. So you think about, again, you think about that experience. What do I want to take with me? What are the accomplishments that I want to focus on? So what I'm saying is you don't have to include everything that you've done in a particular job on your resume. And that's where you're starting to tailor your accomplishment statements, and you start to write a targeted resume, because you have the choice to determine, what do I want to include on this resume? What do I want to write about? What do I want to share with the reader or with my employer? So you get to choose what are those responsibilities, which would be really accomplishments, that I want to include on my resume. So I hope that makes sense and answers that question. There's another one here. How do you deal with part-time versus full-time? Is this something that's brought up in the interview? So Ellie, this is an interesting question. It's certainly brought up much more if you are applying in an academic library setting, or even a public library setting, because they what's important is they really look at, oftentimes how many years of experience that you have, and that can be broken down differently, right, if you're part-time versus full-time. So I'm going to, let's see, I sighed because I was thinking of this in two different ways. So if I'm applying, let's just say for a public librarian position, and I'll be filling out an application. On that application, you're going to have to be very specific about if it was part-time, if it was full-time, maybe how long you were there, specific months and years, so that the time is really getting kind of calculated and added up. So the HR person will have a good sense of how many years of experience you actually have in a particular area. So if I was filling out an application and I was going to be turning in my resume, I might not be that specific on the resume because I know I've done it on the application. With that said, with another type of job, if I'm not filling out the application and being that specific on my resume, I could say, I might add it into my accomplishment statements. I might say, plan and present, I'm just hearing me see how this works. Plan and present highly attended weekly story times for children ages 1 through 10 on a part-time basis. I might get it in there right there. Or maybe I'm going to say part-time library assistant, and maybe I get it in my title right there. So there's different ways that you can try to, again, infuse that part-time. You wouldn't necessarily have to say full-time, because if you're not mentioning it, it's assumed it's full-time. So it's more important that you would have to say something was part-time. I hope that makes sense. What's the best way to list more than one job with the same employer? Great question. All right. See if I can explain this without a visual aid. So here's what I would do. Let's focus on the PowerPoint that I have up there. Let's say library assistant is my last position held with Happyville Public Library. And before that, I'm going to say I was a library clerk. I'm not sure what the order is right there, if that makes sense, but that's what we're going to go with. Okay, so I'm going to say library assistant, Happyville Public Library, Happyville, California, for the dates. I'm going to put the dates of entirety that I've been there. So say I started as a library clerk in 2000, I'm just making stuff up, 2006 to 2010. And I've been a library assistant from 2010 to the present. So I would use my dates to show my years of employment there in entirety. So I'm going to be saying 2006 to present, okay? I'm going to have my accomplishment statements like I have, and then I'm going to add a bullet point here that would say promoted from library clerk to library assistant. So that is a way to show another job title with that same employer. Does that make sense, Rosa? I hope it does. Let me see here. All right, Rosa's typing in. Let's see what you've got. So there are 3 jobs. Well, you could certainly, actually I've had that work with somebody. So again, we did the whole dates. We put in the accomplishment statements, again, and we chose which accomplishment statements we want to use, what's most relevant to what I'm applying for. And then that last bullet point that I'm going to add, I might say promoted from intern to library clerk to library assistant. And you could put it all in there. And if yours is more specific than what I'm talking about, maybe we have to work on that one-on-one, but that is this has come up before, and that's certainly how we would handle it. So what that shows to somebody who's looking at it is it shows, wow, the employer at Happyville Public Library was thrilled with you because they took you from an intern to clerk to assistant, and that shows a lot that you were promoted up into those positions. Okay. All right, looks like I'm caught up on questions and comments for the moment. Anything else about experience? I mean, there's a lot that we could cover. I'm trying to think if there's anything that I just randomly talk about. Let me see if there's something I left off. How far back should you go? Thank you. Great question. Typically, you go back about 10 to 15 years in your work experience. When you start to go back more than that, that's where you start to date yourself. And again, think of your resume overall. It's just your marketing tool. Its only purpose is to get your foot in the door for an interview. That is it. So if people have, and a lot of times people do in this program because they're career changers and they've had this whole other lifetime of work experience and now they're coming to the MLIS program and they have all this experience. But what I'll tell people is, if we decide to leave, or it's in the best interest to leave off some information from your resume, it doesn't mean that that experience or that information is not important. What it can mean is that right now, it's not relevant to this particular job that you're applying for. And on the resume, we want to do everything we can to show to an employer when they're scanning through resumes for that first 7 to 10 seconds that you've got what it takes and that they want to talk to you. And that's the focus of a resume. So Sophia says she left the job after 19 years, now in school for about a year without working. How do I explain that on a resume? So what we would do is we would go back to, we'd probably go back about 10, 12-ish, maybe 15-ish years in the job that you've had, Sophia, and we may not include all the dates all the way back 20 years ago, but we're going to cut it off at some point, and we're going to show the experience that you've had kind of like from, say, 10 years ago to current. And it's okay if you've been out of work for a year because we can put information in there about you being a student. We can start to show, again, the coursework, the projects, if you've been volunteering anywhere. So there's a lot of ways that we can play with that. So yours is one of those that I would look at and would work on one-on-one, but kind of a short answer is that we would just go back probably about 10 years and we would stop it at that point. Okay, good question. What else? What else do you have about experience? Let's see. What if you've been on a job for that long, but previous jobs were also relevant to the current job? Yeah, that's where it starts getting a little tricky. There are some creative ways that I'll help people put information on their resume. Sometimes we'll start to write more of a functional style resume, and I don't know if people know what that means, and I don't want to get us off track and confuse us too much, but if we're writing a functional resume, that means we're gonna focus on accomplishments that fit into a couple skill headings that relate to the LIS field. So we really focus on what you've done, what your experiences are, what your qualifications are, and then towards the bottom of the resume, we might have a section that just says work history, and that's where I might list the title, where you worked, city, state, and some of the dates, and again, not go back all the way, maybe only go back about 10, 12 years in the dates, but we try to make the focus of the resume really focused on your skills and your experience. And that might be hard, what I just said, for some people to visualize if you're not familiar with what I'm talking about. So again, that would be one of those one-off situations where I could work with you individually. Is there a need to specify / say if the position is volunteer? That is such a good question. Well, I'm thinking about this. Most of the time your title is going to say volunteer, so that kind of gives it away right there. I guess I'd be inclined to say, yeah, we'd probably get that in there somehow, that it comes out that it was a volunteer position. If you have something more specific, you want to give me a little more information, and I'll go from there with that. Oh, Tina, this is a great question, and this comes up often, and particularly with people in the MLIS program, because people have been oftentimes, like I said, career changers. They've been out of the workforce for a while, and they're coming back. So what we would do is I would start to work with you on, are there a lot of volunteer types of things that you have done while you've been home? And a lot of times when people are home raising a family, they have been doing things in the community, things in children's school, you know, lots of different things. If for some reason you haven't, then at this point I'm going to recommend that you start to do some volunteering in a library somewhere to get some relevant experience that fits on your resume. And then you're definitely going to be one of the people, when you put your resume together, to focus on coursework and to focus on projects. And you're definitely going to want to get yourself an internship so that you've got some experience. But usually I could find a little bit of information based on things that you've done on the side while you're home with your family that we can include on the resume. Susan's concerned about gaps. Let me see what Susan's other question was. I'm not sure what your initial question was, Susan, about gaps, but again, that's kind of a common thing that I work with students in this program. They usually do have some gaps, so we try to work with it. We got to work with it the best we can. And so again, we'll go to sort of that functional format on a resume, or we come up with some volunteer types of things, community service kinds of things, something to sort of fill in the gaps. But that's going to be something you and I can work on individually. We can set up a phone conversation and talk about it, or we can go back and forth via email. But we'll work it out because it's common. Your concern is a valid concern, but it is common with students in this program. Tina, 46, but don't necessarily want to show my age. 46 is not that old, Tina, just by the way, just to say. But we can certainly try to, how you get around the ageism piece a bit is because all of you are current students. So again, you start to develop a resume that's focused on things that you're doing currently, the MLIS program, the projects that you're doing, the internships that I encourage you to get, all those current things, and that creates a nice resume that's full of relevant experience. So that's how we start to get around it. How much do you tailor the experience? For example, if I'm applying for a Title IX position and only 3 out of 4 of my past jobs are relevant, do I include them all or just the 3? Well, you definitely are going to include the 3, and you could include the 4th one if there's a certain skill set in there that you would want to highlight or demonstrate that doesn't come across in the other 3 jobs. That's how you determine if you're going to do that. Oh, good. I'm glad I answered that, Susan. Okay. Let me see if there's some more. Yep, we have some more. More typing questions coming in. All right. We have about 12 more minutes. All right, I'm just going to talk about this section here while the other questions come in. So after, oh, here we go. Here's Ellie's. So Ellie's question. She's wondering if it's better to only focus on what's relevant or to show that I've been working continuously. It kind of depends, and it depends on working continuously, you know, like how far back, or if you didn't, what do the gaps look like. But here's the thing, and this is for everybody. Even if what you've been doing is, if we're showing working continuously, the jobs don't directly relate to the LIS field or to what you want to go into. Most every job that we've had has certain skills in it that transfer to any other job. And some of those skills are things like demonstrating your communication skills, how you work effectively with other people, that maybe that you're organized, or that you work with diverse clients, or that you can work in a fast-paced environment, or they have excellent time management skills, or those are all kinds of transferable skills. So those types of skills can transfer to any type of job that you go into. So if you've had past work experience that what you were doing on a day-to-day basis was seemingly unrelated to what you want to go into, you want to sit and think about what are some of the aspects of this job or those jobs, again, that I want to bring with me that do relate, that show a transferable skill. And those would be the accomplishment statements that you would write about versus including kind of the day-to-day accomplishments that don't relate to where you want to go into. Oh, I'm glad that makes sense. All right, let's see what else we've got going here. Okay, all right, we're doing good. We'll do some tough questions to be able to answer without a visual here. So we've talked about projects. We've talked about including experience. You could also have a section that might be called, you know, other, or maybe it's just called professional affiliations. But this gives you an idea of how you could present this information on the page. This is a good question. Should you include transferable skills in a qualification summary? I'm not a huge fan of just having a qualification summary that lists a bunch of skill words. In the past, that was probably about 10 years ago, that was pretty common. Writing resumes, we had this keyword section at the top or the skill word section at the top, right? And we just listed all these words. That's not needed anymore because the applicant tracking systems on computer databases are so savvy that no matter where you have a keyword in your resume, it's going to get picked up if someone's kind of scanning for those keywords. So it's going to serve you better to demonstrate those transferable skills within an accomplishment statement, which means you're showing how you have used that skill or how you have developed that skill. And that has a lot more value to an employer than just listing a word on the resume. So I hope that makes sense. Okay, so most people, most students I should say, are a member of either a professional association or a student organization like ASIST here with San Jose State. And if you're not, I highly recommend that you become involved in professional associations that relate to your areas of interest. It's very important to do it now while you're a student because you can get the student rate. It's much cheaper. It's a great way to network with people. It's a nice way, if you do get involved, like on this example here, someone's being a vice president, it's a nice way to get involved and demonstrate your leadership skills, your management skills, and that can also go a long way with an employer. So it's important, and I do recommend that you do get connected, and you can certainly include it on your resume. Now this example here, say with the second one, with this person's a vice president, you could list it the way it is, like on this resume example, or because a vice president is a leadership experience, that could actually be listed up in the related experience section, and you could give this accomplishment statement. What do you do as a vice president? How are you interacting with people? How do you deal with people? And that could become a way to demonstrate more of your interpersonal and leadership skills. Yes, thank you, Philip. It's a fantastic way to get job information. So I encourage you all to get connected if you're not, and take advantage of your student status. That's what I like to tell people. You can get a lot of associations memberships for a lot less because you're a student, and it's a lot easier to walk up to people and introduce yourself and network and start to make a contact when you pull the student card. Oh, I'm a current student at San Jose State in the MLIS program, and I'd really love to get a little more information about, you know, what you do. So it's a great way to use it to your benefit. Okay, 6 minutes left. Next steps for people. Let me do a show of hands, or you guys do a show of hands. How many people have been to the career development section on SLIS Web in the resume section here? Let me see show of hands. Yes, yes, yes. Good, good, good. Just about everybody, but there are some people who did not raise their hand. So if you have not, I highly encourage, you're forgiven, Melissa, but you do need to add it to your to-do list. So on the SLIS homepage, Career Development tab, right up at the top, here's a whole bunch of resources that y'all want to check out. Y'all, I'm not from Texas, that just came out. I'm from California, so I'm not sure where that came from. But there is the resume section right here, and I do encourage you to check all that out. Can answer a lot of the questions you have as well. Let me go back and check a few more questions in here. Yes, yes, yes. Melissa's going to drop by tomorrow. Okay. So, and yes, you all are welcome to send me a copy of your resume or cover letter or curriculum vitae if anybody's inclined to be doing that. Via email, if you could send it as a Word doc, I appreciate it because I like to go in and make comments right on the actual document itself. That's really helpful for me. And do send me, if you can, your final draft, which means put your best foot forward, put the effort into it to see what changes and revisions you can make, and then send it to me for some feedback. And I will be honest with you and give you some really constructive feedback on getting your resume to the next level. So we have just a couple more minutes. See if there's any more questions. All right. All right, let me see. We got a couple more people typing. So this Word version is fine. A lot of people will send PDFs out to companies when they're applying. They'll make their resume PDF and send it off that way. A lot of people do that. I personally just still send it as a Word doc. A lot of people still send it as a Word doc. I think it's up to you. I like to, when you send it to me though for a revision, do send it as a Word doc because I like to make some comments on it. 1 or 2 pages, yes. Do not go more than 2 pages on a resume, ever. If you're doing a curriculum vitae, you can go more than 2 pages. The rule of thumb these days with 1 or 2 pages is this. Let your experience determine how long your resume should be. Personally, I still shoot to get it on 1 page if I can. If I can't, because I have lots of projects, I have lots of great experience, then I'll go for 2 pages, and it's not an issue. But if I can get it on 1 page, I will. I try to just be concise. That way you're not overly wordy. You're not adding a bunch of stuff that doesn't need to be on there. You know, mine's got lots of experience, and I still get it on 1 page. I think it's become like a challenge for me. Can you read comments if I add any to the document? Can you read comments if I add any to the document? I'm not sure about that. Where's the best place in the resume for volunteer experiences? That's a great question, Lizette. So if your volunteer experiences relate to LIS, which they most probably will, I'm going to guess, if they do, then you're going to want to have it up towards your related experience section. Include it all in there. If they are volunteer experiences that are just in the community, working for Habitat for Humanity or something. If you have a leadership role, again, we might blow that up and add some more accomplishment statements. If we're just sort of listing, these are things that I do voluntarily and in the community, it's going to be down towards the bottom because it has less relevance. I want what's most important to be top half, top 3/4 of the page. If I got a 2-page resume, then what's most important, what's most relevant is going to be on the first page. Denise, I graduated this past spring, but I saw this workshop and thought it was great. Is it okay if I send you my resume via email? Yes, you may, and I'm still happy to look at it for you. All right. Let's see. Yes, exactly. Yep. Actually, that is correct. Dr. Hirsch, Sandra Hirsch, gave everybody who graduated in the spring as kind of a gift, the membership to the Career Center. You can use the Jill.Klees. Let me go back to the very first slide. It's Jill.Klees, there it is, at sjsu.edu. And that is the email to use. It's 1 page, even with project. Again, it depends. A lot of times you can still get it all on 1 page, but if you have 4 projects and you have some good related experience, and it pushes it off onto 2 pages, I'm sure that's going to be fine. Go for it. I'd rather have you get everything out of your head, get it on paper, and then you can send it to me, and I'll help you with the formatting, and I'll help you figure out what's the best way to present it on a piece of paper. But I'd rather you not leave things out that are important because you're trying to fit it into 1 page. Okay? So it is 7 o'clock. I want to be cognizant of everyone's time, particularly if you're not here in Pacific time. And see if there's any last question. There is my email, though, so you're welcome to send me questions separate from this workshop, and I will certainly get back to you. You guys are really welcome. Glad this was helpful, and I do appreciate the questions. And I'll probably be talking to all of you. I'll be looking forward to your emails. All right. Looks good. All right. Good night, everybody. Have a great evening.
Hey, everyone. This is Sean. Jennifer actually isn't going to be able to join us this evening for our scheduled business meeting. She's not feeling well. So I'm
from the membership, which has been great. So hopefully we can generate a little bit more interest from outside the board, and that would be super. So I guess maybe I will send out an email later this evening requesting more press on that, so to speak. But I think we're well on our way to having a successful newsletter.
That is great news. That sounds fantastic, and I apologize for butchering your name. I feel terrible. But now I know I won't get it wrong again. So we had a couple of raffles that are now finished, and I think we're going to hear from Melissa on those. Let me hang up or click this here.
Hi guys, yeah, I purchased all the raffle stuff and sent it out. So that's about it. I'm waiting for my reimbursement from ASIS.
Well, that's a simple and awesome report. That's great. So the next thing we need to do is approve the October minutes. Hopefully someone would make a motion to approve those. All right. So anyone in opposition of approving the October minutes? Okay, doesn't look like there's any opposition, so we'll go ahead and say those are approved. All right. So we can move on to from the conferences. I'm very excited to hear about how these went. So why don't we start with Amelia? Oh, that's a good point, Melissa. If everyone would click yes. Thanks, Derek. Thanks for letting us know. Actually, I'm sure how to clear these check marks, but I think that's okay for now. Everybody can do it themselves. Perfect. Okay. Some promises I will hang up so Amelia can.
Well, actually, I wrote that and the talk button came back up, so I don't know. Conference was awesome. It was really neat to go to. I'd never been to a conference before. It was also pretty exciting because Hurricane Sandy came through, so there was a lot of uncertainty about whether people were going to be able to leave the Hilton or not, and hunker down in the Hilton. But yeah, I got to meet a lot of really interesting people whose papers I'd read before. I met some faculty at San Jose State, which was really nice to match a face with a name, which doesn't really happen very often, so that was cool to have some FaceTime with people like Dr. Hirsch, and I got to meet Melissa. There's a lot of really interesting talks going on. Probably my favorite one, though, was a student poster presentation. So it was mostly either current master's students or recently graduated students, and they had done some really interesting projects, and I found that resonated with me pretty well. Some of the other ones were interesting. There's one about metadata that I went to that I enjoyed. I did find, though, that some of it was a little over my head, and I tended to space out somewhat in some of the presentations, but really enjoyed it overall. It was a great experience. Attendance was kind of low because of the hurricane. A lot of people ended up canceling or they left early, but I mean, there were still, a couple hundred people there, definitely. Not so much on that, but I did get some renewed sort of enthusiasm about our symposium. I met a few other student ASIS chapter leaders, and I also ended up volunteering myself to help out with the student poster presentation panel for next year, and I think we might be able to get some support from some of the people involved with the digital liaison special interest group, so some people that are already in the field to help out with that a little bit, which I think would be pretty awesome.
That's really great. That's awesome. That sounds like it was well worth attending. You mentioned the spring symposium. We're going to talk about that a little bit later on tonight, and hopefully at least brainstorm or start to brainstorm some ideas for a theme. But in terms of scheduling, I think we're still waiting on some information from Dr. Hirsch, who is on vacation until after Thanksgiving. So a little bit of a stall on that. But we can start thinking about it for sure. There's a lot of enthusiasm for that idea. So that's great. Melissa, did you want to add anything? You were there as well, I believe.
Yes, my second year attending, and I'll obviously be there again next year because I'm in the Gateway program. It was just a good conference. It was interesting. I didn't get to attend as many sessions as I would have liked to because I'm in Gateway, so we were having meetings at the same time as some of the sessions. But there were obviously a lot less people because of weather than there were last year. And it looks like I'll be on the policy, the SIG for policy as of this coming, whenever we officially reactivate this next month or whatever. And they have asked me if I would be interested in being chair of it next year. So I don't know if I am or not, but if anybody's interested in sitting on the policy committee or the policy SIG, let me know and I can get you in touch with the right people. Otherwise, that's about it.
Jennifer also sent along some questions about our flyer for the California Library Association Conference in San Jose. And I'm just going to, those questions were, did the flyer print okay? Was it there on time? Was there space for it at the SLIS table? And if anyone attended other than Rosa. And I don't know, Rosa, do you want to jump on and just tell us a little bit about it? or if anyone who was there wants to jump on. It sounds like there were a bunch of you.
Oh, hello, it's me. So yes, I went to the Internet Librarian Conference in Monterey and the CLA Conference in San Jose. I brought the flyers in on the first days of the conference to the exhibit halls at the SLIS booth. And we had a nice spot on the table with the flyer that printed out pretty well. And I think a lot of people saw it. I also saw that SLIS Connect and the ALAST student chapter also had either business cards and flyers on the table. So I didn't get to hang out at the table a lot, so I didn't see how many people were taking our flyers, but I hope that they were very helpful and that some people learn more about our organization.
I just saw in the chat Melissa got to accept the award. That's really, really cool. That's awesome. I don't know. I'm curious to hear what that experience was like, if you would be willing to share.
You mean getting the award? They screwed it up, but I don't, it was Naresh and Dick, I don't know, decided that they'd get up there and say what they were going to say, and neglected to look over to the fact that we were there to accept the award. So we just kind of, or I just finally stood up and said, I'm here, I will take the award. So we had two tables of people because we had that many people at the conference from San Jose State. But you know, we got the award. It was great. Hopefully we can have a repeat performance this year, and hopefully somebody else from the board will be there to assist in. To answer your question, it's okay. So anybody who's a member of ASIS can come. So obviously we had some members of the board that were students in the MLIS program, but then everybody who's a member of the Gateway PhD program from San Jose State is required to attend. It's part of our residency. So you have a whole bunch of students who come, as well as all of the faculty advisors to those students show, and any other faculty who have decided on their own or have something that they're presenting at the conference attend also. So there were 2 tables worth of us. I think there were probably 20 of us in all.
That's quite a, would you say that we were one of the more well-represented universities? I mean, that seems like a lot of people.
Yeah, I think we were one of the largest groups there. There might have been a couple others because, you know, think about where we were. So anybody local to any of the universities there in Maryland showed up too, and so they had, you know, home turf advantage. But we were definitely a massive presence at the conference. Plus, we had 2 staff members unrelated to faculty who come along and travel. One works our desk, and the other one is our technical support person. So we did have a
That's fantastic. One of the first things I did in the role of vice chair was to go through all the student chapters, looking for contact information so that we could invite them to our business meetings. And it was interesting to see all of their websites. You know, some of them don't even have ways to contact the chapter. So I don't know, just going through that, I still feel like we're the best one that I saw, which made me feel good. So let's jump back to the agenda real quick, just so we can all take a second to see where we are. We've got the reports from the conferences. I'm going to go ahead and look at the details for the rest of our fall events. These are the 3 we've got scheduled. Jennifer asked me to pass on the note that she feels like everyone's just been doing an awesome job, and I certainly see it as well, of getting the word out. And I think the attendance at our last 2 events bears that out too. There were just so many people at the at the resume workshop, and then of course at our session where we talked about the different professors, both good and bad. So that was great, and really useful stuff too that I think is going to benefit everybody that attended. And Amelia, if you want to jump on and talk a little bit about these, if you have anything to add or expand on, that would be cool.
Yeah, well, Marquita has actually been on the ball with Dr. Lau, and I was going to ask you. That's actually, I forgot when I suggested that date, but it's my birthday, and it's late here for me because I'm on the East Coast. So I was wondering if someone else wants to moderate that. Maybe Marquita, if you're going to go anyway, would you mind introducing Dr. Lau? And then Alice Scott is going to talk about metadata, and she's been really busy, and I haven't heard from her in a couple weeks, so I need to get on maybe nagging her a little bit and nailing down an exact date that she wants to do that, but she's for sure going to do it sometime in December. And then Matt Carmichael is a recent new member, and he, I think it has either works or he has an internship for the Hood River Historical Society Library, and he just gave a presentation at a conference in Oregon, and so he's going to do kind of a little mini presentation for us on his work with archives and whatnot.
I love the idea of the student speakers. I just think that, and it's a great opportunity for whoever is getting to speak too, but I just think it's really neat to be interacting with a fellow student that way. I think it's great. So that's that for our fall events. The last thing on our agenda is to talk about events for early spring. And Jennifer thought that a mid-April date is going to be the most likely time for the symposium. So these are the questions that she came up with. I don't think, she doesn't have the symposium on here as well, but some kind of theme. She had a couple of suggestions. Let's see. Diversity, mobile technology, interdisciplinary studies. I don't think we need to make a decision tonight, but just getting some ideas thrown out there would probably be helpful for when we are able to schedule that and really start planning in earnest. So, feel free to, maybe let's do this. Let's talk about that first, and then we'll go down each one of these questions after that. So go ahead and drop suggestions into the chat window, and I'm going to click off here in case anybody wants to jump on and just verbalize them. All right, it doesn't seem like there's a ton of ideas flying around for that just yet. Yeah, let's just talk about these questions that Jennifer typed up for us. I mentioned I really like the idea of student speakers. I don't know if anyone here is interested in that or knows of someone who might be, or faculty speaker suggestions. I love the idea of doing another social gathering. I thought that coffee break was pretty fun. The one that was a month or so ago, maybe more. A logo contest for our chapter. I think that would be really cool.
No, we haven't dropped that necessarily. It just the way it worked out, we had Jill speak tonight instead. So to keep it from not turning into, you know, a couple-hour-long affair, we decided to not have a student speaker tonight.
Have we made a request from members or let them know that we're looking for student speakers to speak at future business meetings? If we have, I apologize. I must have missed it. Okay, I figured as much. Did we get any response to that besides Matt? Yeah, it might be good to remind folks. Newsletter would be great, or even just, yeah, posting it on Facebook. It really is a good opportunity for students, and really something you can add on a resume. Ellie, do you want to expand on that a little bit, that you're not convinced it's the best time?
I will actually. Sarah Emerson and I actually went back and forth quite a bit on this last year, and I guess the previous membership director sort of came up with the idea. She gave me the history behind it. The previous membership director before me thought it would be great to drum up more people at the business meetings. So she suggested this idea of having people talk at the meeting. I don't know. It doesn't always feel right to me to post it right at the end. You know, the students who come and do this, it's a lot of effort, and I feel like it would be better maybe to have a better place for it rather than right at the end of a meeting that they might not be interested in sitting through. I don't know. And I wasn't quite sure about the necessity to market, to drum people up to come to the business meeting. It's fantastic if they come. I'm just not sure. It didn't feel quite right to drum up, I don't know, to use that just to get people to come to the business meeting, if that makes sense. That's kind of where I'm at on the issue anyway.
We did it because we want to higher numbers. The more numbers you have when you go to put your report in at the end of the year, the better you look.
Right. No, that makes total sense to me, and I understand why it was originally done, and I love the idea of getting students to talk. I really do. I just feel like, wow, the membership drive was fantastic. We got like 30+ members doing what we did. Maybe we could now shift it away a little bit from the business meeting focus and, I don't know, come up with an event where people are, like an event where maybe 4 speakers go one after each other. I don't know. I just feel like there's something there that could be worked out or talked about.
So your suggestion would be to give them their own space rather than try and tie it in with a business meeting. Yeah, I don't have any objection to that. Certainly would want Jennifer to get to weigh in on that. But I think it's an interesting idea. I don't know, anybody else have any thoughts on including student speakers at the end of business meetings?
I mean, I don't think it's the best format either, like Ellie was saying. I just kind of had an idea that maybe we could do just sort of a lightning talk event, try to get, 10 different people to come and do like a 5 to 7 minute presentation, and that's a lot less to ask of somebody than, to fulfill a whole hour or a half hour long. Yeah, I think I like that.
The whole thing about the membership drive, those numbers are slightly skewed, right? You picked up all of the San Jose State Gateway PhD students in the membership drive. They had to join in order to get to the student rate to go to the conference, and we all had to go to the conference. So a chunk of those people that we got who joined had to join. It wasn't like they went, it's a membership drive, we're going to come join. So our number is technically slightly skewed there as to how many people did join. That's one. And two, personally, I don't care. We tried it where they presented beforehand. We tried it where they presented afterwards. I was actually the first person to ever do it. It's not as horrific as it sounds to do an hour. Half hour is not a big deal. What we noticed in the past is the more things that you have, it becomes taxing on those that have to A, arrange it, B, attend it. And yeah, it's nice to have a lot of events spread throughout, but it does get difficult. I do like the idea of the lightning speaker type thing, but I do know it was seen as a real positive thing that we had these people from the organization who were actually volunteering to speak and were giving these sessions once a month. So.
Well, I'm content for this meeting anyway to just note that we've talked about it and keep our eye on how that's working, good or bad, having the student speaker at the end. I mean, Matt's scheduled for the next one, so that's not going to change. We don't have anything scheduled. We don't have a student speaker scheduled past that. So, oh, geez, Melissa. Well, luckily we're close to being done, so you can take a break. So yeah, I think it's just a really good idea to keep an eye on this, both in terms of attendance and how it's working for the organizers, how it's working for the speakers. That's all really good stuff. Maybe we can, any other ideas for spring events? Faculty speaker suggestions that we'd want to pursue? I would love, and I can certainly say about this, but Raymond Dean, I know there were a lot of nice things said about him in our meeting where we were talking about different classes, and I'm taking a class from him now, and he's fantastic. But any other suggestions that we should pursue? That's a really cool idea, Rosa. I think that would be great. Jennifer also volunteered that she would look for or ask Mary Minnow if she'd be willing to speak. She is teaching a copyright class right now. Doesn't have any idea if Mary would be interested or available, but is willing to ask, certainly. I can send you that, Amelia. And Jennifer also proposed another social gathering, although we don't have any more money for raffles, but in the second week of the semester. So if I look at my calendar, that's pretty much, that'd be like the last week of, or first week of February, it looks like, pretty much. How's that time for people? Just another note too that, oh, sorry, we're talking about a date for the social gathering in the spring semester, and the date that Jennifer proposed was the second week of the semester, which by my calendar looks like it would be the first week of February. First full week of February, so starting on Monday the 4th. I'm pretty new at this. I don't know, Tuesdays, Thursdays, I don't know if we need to pick a date specifically right now. I think that would be great if we could. Do we want to just say Tuesday the 5th? Okay. Tuesday the 5th it is. And we'll say 7 p.m. That seems to be time that works for everybody, or works for the most people. Yeah, Amelia, that would be great. Or, you know, spend some time thinking about it now, so that, you know, we can come with some suggestions at the next meeting. And hopefully by then we'll have heard from Dr. Hirsch and can start talking about planning ideas and forming subcommittees if we need to, which will be awesome. We're going to start inviting, it sounds like, to other chapters, other student chapters, to some of our meetings, and especially to the events like the coffee breaks and certainly the symposium, which I'm pretty excited about, because I don't know, you know, other than, oh, that's awesome. Other than what I saw just looking through the websites, it'd really be nice to hear from them and what they're doing and how their program works. So that's just more of an FYI than anything else. Anything else anybody wants to add about spring events for now? It's the last thing on our agenda, so I don't want to cut anybody off if they have something to add.
Just to jump in, I've been sitting here thinking, trying to remember a lot of our conversations about the whole business meeting talk, and I remember that Sarah said when it started, her intention, you know, and of course we can always change how we want it to proceed, of course, this year, but her intention originally was for it to be a very casual talk, and she said it really changed when we started recording the sessions. So because there was this pressure to put up all the recorded sessions onto the website, which looks great, and it's also great for the student, but it becomes a much more professional thing, and she felt like, and I tend to agree, that because we set up this professional expectation, that the venue suddenly wasn't the right place to do it. So anyway, I just wanted to add that there was that perspective, and maybe I like the informality. You know, maybe at the end we could bring that back. I don't know, just a suggestion to kind of mull over.
In terms of, do you mean turn off the recording at the end and allow for just a more sort of informal chat session, but then also still have a more formal presentation?
I think the recording was always kept on, but it was more informal in that students would just come and talk about their experiences, and they didn't feel the pressure to create, you know, the PowerPoint, just make it much more professional. But as soon as, you know, those sessions were actually recorded and they're now posted up on the website, that people felt that pressure to really make it good, you know, because it's permanently there, rather than just recorded a session of, you know, talking to all of us about, you know, I did this internship, blah, blah, blah. Does that make sense?
It does. Yeah, other than just noting it, that's, for now, that's something I, you know, again, I think we should certainly think about and keep an eye on. And maybe the lightning round suggestion, which I think would be really fun to have people just come talk for a few minutes about a very specific thing, and have a bunch of those. You know, that I think there's a opportunity to make that kind of informal as well. Obviously, you want people to be prepared, especially with such a short amount of time, but because you're not asking someone to prepare a long presentation, maybe that would end up being a little bit more informal. Just a thought, though. Was there anything else anybody wanted to add before we wrap up? Jennifer found this nice picture for us, so everyone be sure to thank her next time you talk to her. All right, if there's nothing else, I guess we'll go ahead and call our November business meeting concluded. I know we've got some events coming up, or an event coming up at the end of the month, so hopefully people will attend and get a chance to chat with everybody then. And then if not, we will see everybody at our December meeting. Get some sleep, Derek.
Martin, it's really easy. If you want, you could, if you have Dr. Loudon, me or you, her slides, you can forward them to me, and I'll set the whole room up for you. And then you basically just introduce her, and that's that. Pretty simple. But I can send you an email with the basics.
I'll make sure to remind her to send us her slides. I'll email her right now.
Cool. Sounds good. All right. Good night, guys.